Welcome, night owls and seekers of the strange. Tonight we're venturing into the dimly lit world of after-hours gas stations, where flickering lights and silent aisles harbor secrets few dare to imagine. Brace yourself. Once we cross the threshold into these nocturnal domains, returning unchanged may be impossible. Harvey took the graveyard shift at the local gas station for one reason. It offered steady pay with minimal supervision. He liked the quiet that came after midnight, imagining he could read a novel or scroll his phone without interruption. The station stood at the edge of a desolate highway, flanked by tall, unkempt weeds. Only the neon signage offered a faint glow against the darkness. On his first shift, the silence felt strangely hollow. He wiped down the counters, arranged a few snack displays, and tested the pumps to make sure everything was in order. An overhead security lamp cast a dull circle of light onto the asphalt outside. Most nights, only the occasional trucker or local farmhand stopped by. Harvey had always believed that a steady hum of fluorescent bulbs would be more soothing than eerie. But as soon as 1 a.m. rolled around, a gnawing sense of unease settled over him. He remembered an odd rumor the day shift clerk, Annette, had mentioned. Pump 7, located farthest from the main building, supposedly acted up at night. Though Harvey had chuckled at what he deemed an overactive imagination, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about Pump 7 beckoned him. Its overhead light flickered more often than the others, and sometimes he thought he saw a shape moving around it from the corner of his eye. At around 2:30 a.m., the station was empty. Harvey busied himself organizing a new shipment of candy bars. Suddenly, a soft ding signaled someone pulling up to Pump 7. Surprised, he glanced at the security monitor. Sure enough, headlights illuminated the far end of the lot. A dark sedan idled there, driver's side door just out of camera frame. Harvey waited for the person to step inside the station, but no one appeared. After several minutes, he decided to investigate. The air outside was still heavy with the scent of stale gasoline. Approaching Pump 7, he saw that the driver's seat was empty. The door hung open, keys still in the ignition. The nozzle rested in the holster, unused. A wave of dread passed through him. Who leaves their car running and disappears into the darkness? Harvey did a quick perimeter check. The ground behind the station led to an overgrown field. He saw no footprints, no sign of a fleeing figure. Uneasily, he returned to the sedan. He turned the engine off to save the battery and gently closed the door. Instinct told him to lock the vehicle, but he hesitated, uncertain whether that would be wise. Finally, he left it unlocked in case the driver returned. As he headed back inside, a shiver traced his spine and he kept glancing over his shoulder. For the next hour, the station remained silent. Harvey couldn't stop checking the monitors, fully expecting the missing driver to appear. Instead, the camera for Pump 7 crackled with intermittent static. At one point, the screen flickered, revealing a faint outline by the car, a tall, gaunt shape. He rubbed his eyes, and by the time his vision cleared, the figure was gone. At 4 a.m., the ding rang again. Harvey darted to the window, expecting to see the sedan's owner. Instead, Pump 7's overhead light flickered, and the shadow of the car looked distorted in the gloom. Something about the silhouette seemed off, like an elongated arm stretching toward the car's trunk. Heart thumping, he pressed closer to the glass. An unnatural hush enveloped the station, as if every other sound had been muffled. Harvey knew he should call the local sheriff, but he worried about sounding paranoid. Mustering courage, he grabbed his flashlight and stepped out once more. He approached Pump 7, scanning the area. The darkness felt denser here, the overhead lamp doing little to dispel it. A sudden breeze rustled the weeds, momentarily sounding like a whisper. He circled the sedan, checking inside. Nothing had changed except for one detail. The keys, which he had left in the ignition, now sat on the passenger seat, neatly placed. He heard a faint scraping noise behind him. Jolted, he whirled around, shining the flashlight. The beam caught nothing but empty space. Yet he could have sworn he glimpsed a black, shifting shape near the edge of the light's reach. His heart pounded so hard that he felt slightly dizzy. He backed away carefully, never taking his eyes off that spot, then returned to the station. The rest of the shift dragged, weighed down by dread. When dawn finally broke, Harvey was relieved to see a faint line of pink on the horizon. As soon as the day shift manager arrived, he led her outside, pointing to the sedan. Except it was gone. He surveyed the lot in disbelief. No tracks, no squealing tires. It had simply vanished. Annette arrived a bit later. Harvey recounted everything. She listened quietly, her face pale. Then she told him about a local story. A customer once vanished from that station years ago. His car was found at Pump 7, keys in the ignition, door wide open. The official explanation was foul play, but the sheriff never solved it. Some nights, people claimed the lost driver, or something that looked like him, returned looking for a way home. Harvey tried to laugh it off, but each time he started his night shift in the following weeks, a knot formed in his stomach whenever he glanced at Pump 7. Occasionally, the ding would sound, and he'd see a fleeting shape on the monitor, always too quick for a proper look. No one in the station, no logs in the system. Pump 7 always read idle. He never found more evidence, never saw another abandoned car. But the atmosphere around that lone pump remained thick with unseen tension, as though a silent watcher lingered there. Over time, Harvey learned to cope by sticking to the well-lit parts of the building, rarely venturing out alone. The sedan never returned, yet the memory haunted him. Sometimes, late at night, he replayed the events in his mind. The missing driver, the flickering light, the shifting shadow. He wondered if a single moment of curiosity had brushed him against another realm, a place where lost travelers prowled, trapped in a loop of confusion. And each time the overhead lamp flickered out at Pump 7, Harvey felt an unspoken presence flicker in with it, waiting in the shadows for the next unsuspecting soul. Nissa took the overnight shift at a tiny gas station located just off a long strip of desert highway. The view from behind the counter was expansive, a whole lot of nothing, with cacti and low hills forming silhouettes against the star-filled sky. On her first night, she marveled at how lonely the place felt. No cars passed for hours at a time. The hum of ancient refrigerators filled the store, a background noise that made everything else seem too quiet. She ran through her usual routine, restocking candy, cleaning the coffee machine, checking that the restrooms were presentable. As the clock neared 2 a.m., she settled onto a stool behind the register, eyes drooping from boredom. Suddenly, the motion sensor at the front door pinged. Surprised, she looked up to see if a customer had arrived, but the parking lot was empty. The door remained closed, locked in place, but the sensor kept blinking as if someone was standing just outside. Nissa got up to peer out the glass door. Moonlight illuminated the pumps and a dusty patch of pavement. Nothing. She turned off the sensor alarm with a small switch near the register, assuming it was malfunctioning. Moments later, her phone buzzed with a text from her cousin, something mundane about a family dinner next weekend. Nissa took a second to answer. When she looked up again, her stomach clenched. A pale face hovered just outside the window, pressed close enough that she could see wisps of breath fogging the glass. The figure seemed to be peering in with hollow eyes. Startled, she lurched backward. In the split second it took her to gather herself, the face vanished, her heart hammered. She rushed to the window, searching for footprints or any hint of movement. The desert stretched out in all directions, silent under the stars. She stepped outside cautiously, flipping on the station's floodlights to dispel the darkness. No one was there. The sense of being watched lingered, making her skin crawl. She locked the door behind her when she went back in, telling herself it must have been a trick of the light or her overtired mind. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, leaving Nissa to wonder if she'd imagined it. The next shift was quiet too, until around 2:30 a.m., when the overhead lights flickered. In that momentary dimness, Nissa caught the outline of someone standing at the window again. This time, a jolt of terror froze her. She forced herself to blink, and when the light steadied, the figure was gone. As though confirming her worst fears, the security camera monitor momentarily displayed static, then returned to normal. No record of anyone outside. She tried to remain calm, distracting herself by organizing the chip aisle. While she worked, her mind raced. Could it be a drifter from the highway? A lost traveler looking for help? But why linger silently in the shadows? Why vanish when confronted? Near 3 a.m., a battered truck pulled in. Relieved at having a customer, Nissa smiled as a wiry older man approached the counter with a coffee. He noticed her uneasy expression and asked if she was all right. Hesitantly, she mentioned seeing a face at the window. His own expression darkened, and he set his coffee down slowly. He told her a local legend. A hitchhiker was said to roam this stretch of desert, sometimes appearing to lonely drivers or vacant businesses after dark. People claimed his face was pale, his demeanor strange, as if searching for something he'd lost. The man left with a quiet, worried nod. Nissa tried to shrug it off, but his words only deepened her anxiety. She started dreading the next time the lights would flicker or the sensor would ping. Around 4 a.m., exhaustion took hold, and she dozed off on the stool, only to jolt awake moments later. In her groggy state, she thought she heard the faintest tap on the glass door. Rubbing her eyes, she scanned the lot. The desert wind had picked up, sending small swirls of dust across the asphalt. The overhead lights cast a circle of brightness around the pumps, but beyond that, everything lay in darkness. She told herself she was safe indoors. She refilled her coffee, ensuring her phone was within easy reach. Tension coiled in her stomach, an unrelenting sense that she wasn't alone. As dawn approached, the horizon tinged with pale light. Nissa felt her shoulders relax. The desert, once menacing in the dark, grew more reassuring under the emerging sun. She almost convinced herself the face at the window had been a hallucination or dream. But a sudden beep from the security system drew her to the monitors. The camera feed for the front door flickered once more. In that brief flicker, she clearly saw a figure standing just outside, face turned toward the camera as if fully aware of being watched. A second beep, and the feed went back to normal. Empty lot. Her shift ended at 6 a.m. The manager arrived, eyes bloodshot from a different kind of exhaustion. Nissa explained what she'd seen. He nodded slowly, remarking that odd occurrences had been reported at that station for years. Nothing harmful, just unnerving. He joked that if she made it a few more nights, the face might even start waving hello. Nissa didn't laugh. Night after night she returned, each time bracing for that dreaded moment. Sometimes the face appeared at the window, a pale oval with indistinct features. Sometimes the flickering lights hinted at movement just beyond the glass. A couple of times, she heard an echoing knock as if from inside the walls. She began to suspect the figure was no ordinary person, but rather an imprint of something lost in the desert, forever trying to come in from the cold emptiness. By the end of her first month, Nissa handed in her notice. She'd saved enough, and her nerves were frayed. On her last night, the face appeared again, this time pressed so close to the glass that she could almost discern sorrowful eyes. She locked eyes with it, feeling an inexplicable wave of sadness. Then, just like that, it vanished. She left at dawn, never looking back. Though she told few people about her experiences, she always carried the memory of that silent watcher on the edge of the desert, waiting for a moment to cross the threshold into the world of the living. Kyle prided himself on being the kind of person who didn't scare easily. He had grown up in a rough neighborhood, so the quiet solitude of working nights at a suburban gas station felt tame by comparison. The flickering neon sign buzzed, casting a pinkish glow on the pumps below. The station wasn't large, just a single row of pumps and a cramped convenience store. But it was enough to keep him employed while he took online courses during the day. For weeks, everything was routine. He'd greet a handful of travelers each night, ring up the occasional snack sale, and pass time reading textbooks. Then, one night, he noticed a young woman standing across the street, beneath a dim street lamp. She wore a hooded jacket, facing the station but never crossing. Leonard thought she might be waiting for a bus, though no route ran there after midnight. Hours passed, and she remained motionless. The next night, he spotted her again in the same spot, still unmoving. Curious and slightly concerned, Kyle stepped outside, intending to call out. The woman turned away as if to avoid his gaze. He took a few steps toward her, but an uneasy feeling stopped him from going farther. Something about her presence felt off, like a painting set against the wrong background. The following evening, Kyle arrived for his shift with a plan. If the woman appeared again, he would offer her a warm drink or a place to call for help. By 1 a.m., she emerged under the flickering street lamp, her posture rigid. He gathered a bottle of water and stepped outside. The night air felt unnaturally cold. "Hey," he called softly, venturing a friendly tone. She lifted her face just enough for him to catch a glimpse. Her eyes shone with an odd luminosity, like a distant reflection. She retreated further into the darkness, and he stopped, alarmed. The neon sign overhead buzzed louder than usual, intensifying the atmosphere of unease. After a few moments, she vanished around the corner. Kyle stood there, water bottle in hand, uncertain what to make of the encounter. At work the next night, he found the store manager rummaging through old files behind the counter. When Kyle asked about the abandoned area across the street, the manager sighed. Years ago, there had been a small diner there, but it burned down under suspicious circumstances. A young waitress had died in the fire, rumored to be trapped inside by a vengeful ex. Local legends claimed her spirit lingered, appearing late at night. Kyle's mind raced, connecting the story to the hooded figure. Still skeptical, he continued his shift. Around 2 a.m., the lights in the store flickered, a phenomenon he'd grown used to. Yet the flicker persisted, causing the overhead bulbs to pulse erratically. He glanced at the front window to see if the woman had returned. Instead, an unmistakable form now stood at the threshold of the doors. Head bowed, jacket hood concealing most of her face. Kyle's heart jolted. He hadn't heard the door chime, meaning she was still outside. Slowly, she raised her hand to the glass, palm pressing softly against it. An instinctive chill coursed through Kyle. He gripped the edge of the counter, torn between fear and compassion. She took a step backward, then turned and drifted toward the pumps, moving with an unnatural smoothness. Leonard rushed outside, ignoring the goosebumps spreading along his arms. He found her by one of the pumps, standing perfectly still beneath the neon glow. Her posture slumped, as if weighed down by despair. Approaching cautiously, he tried speaking again. She offered no response. He drew closer, and a wave of cold air washed over him. Just as he was about to reach out, she lifted her head, revealing empty eye sockets. A silent scream lodged in his throat. Then the overhead light surged, bathing everything in a harsh glare. In that instant, she dissolved, leaving only the faintest outline of mist in the air. Kyle staggered back inside, trembling. He locked the doors, heart pounding, replaying the sight of those hollow eyes. Trying to remain rational, he searched online for any local news story about a fire. Indeed, he found a brief article confirming a diner fire 2 decades earlier. The victim was a waitress in her early 20s, pinned inside by debris. No mention of a haunting, but the details chilled him further. For the remainder of the shift, Kyle remained on edge, eyes flicking to the windows, half expecting to see the hooded figure again. Occasionally, the neon sign stuttered, and he braced himself for another apparition. Each time, nothing materialized. A sense of guilt welled up. He felt powerless, as though the figure wanted something he couldn't give. A chance to be heard, perhaps a guiding hand to a final rest. As dawn approached, the manager returned, and Leonard tried to explain. The manager wore a sympathetic but uneasy expression, confessing that others had reported similar sightings in the past. Some believed the spirit was searching for closure, or maybe just a way to cross that deserted street back to the place where her life ended. Kyle left the gas station that morning, feeling forever changed. Over the next few weeks, he continued to see fleeting glimpses of the hooded figure, though never as clearly as that night beneath the neon lights. Sometimes she appeared in the corner of his eye, only to fade when he turned his head. He made a habit of leaving a warm drink outside near the pumps, a silent offering of comfort for a wandering soul. Eventually, Kyle found a different job, one that didn't keep him anchored to that lonely station under the unearthly glow of neon. But he never truly escaped the memory of that silent presence. In quiet moments, he wondered if her spirit still lingered, roaming the asphalt in search of a life that was tragically cut short. And he couldn't help but feel that, in some inexplicable way, she was watching over him too, perhaps a guardian from beyond, or simply a restless wanderer who found solace in his small gesture of compassion. Beyond the pumps and flickering lights, these tales remind us that the night shift carries its own haunting burdens. Darkness conceals more than quiet roads and empty aisles. It stirs the unknown lurking just outside our comprehension. Until next time, stay vigilant And remember, not all visitors come in search of fuel.